Welcome to our second episode of DAIScover Journeys, where we will explore career paths, insights of our accomplished alumni. My name is Supriya, and I'm here to be your host along with Raj. After the success of our first episode, we are excited to continue this journey in a new field today. While I know very little about this field, I'm here to learn and understand from our alumnus, Sahil Kejriwal. I'm thrilled to announce the guest for this session. He's a 2006 alumnus of DAIS and is a life sciences professional with experience in genomic diagnostics, genetic counseling, public health research, and strategy consulting. Sahil has earned his undergraduate degree from University of College London, master's from Stanford, and a PhD from University of Washington. Over the years, he's had the opportunity to contribute towards improved patient outcomes and through the development of and delivery of genomic services in India. A big thank you to Rajashri, our partner at Univariety. Thank you for making this series possible, and thank you for your continuing support. If you'd love to say a few words about Univariety, please chime in.
Thank you so much, Supriya. Good evening, everyone. I hope you all are doing great. I am Rajashi from Univariety. We are the official alumni management partner of DAIS. Our objective is to build comprehensive, collaborated, and responsive alumni management and engagement platform for you all. We are headquartered in Hyderabad with teams working pan-India. Keeping students as the focal point, our platform enables this best guidance for students through technology and a bunch of networking and learning opportunities for alumni. Over to you, Supriya.
Thanks, Rajshri. I think now we should just dive in with our speaker. So Sahil, could you please share a little bit about yourself and like how you can walk us through perhaps a presentation of what got you interested in the field of life sciences and your perspective of it?
Thanks, Supriya. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks, Rajashri, for putting this together. And thanks to the audience for joining. I'm just going to share my screen. So just give me a... All right. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of what I'll be covering today. So I'll start with my experiences at DAIS in college and grad school and key sort of takeaways from those experiences. Then I'll very broadly discuss career options in the life sciences. The life sciences is an extremely broad sort of field. So it won't be possible to go into like details about specific career options, but I will discuss them broadly. After that, I'll share insights from my work in industry and in consulting. And then finally, we'll wrap up with a Q&A session that will be moderated by Supriya and the Univariety team. So here's a brief timeline of my journey. I graduated from DAIS back in 2006, so 18 years ago. It's been a long time. And then pursued my undergraduate degree at University College London. And then after that, I spent a couple of years in India figuring out, what I wanted to do. And then went on to do my master's at Stanford and my PhD at the University of Washington. And a lot of my field research was actually based in India. So I did come back to India after 2 years of the PhD in Washington. And I got a fellowship to do research in India. And then after moving back to India, I started working with a genomic testing company. And I'll give you the reasoning for that in a later slide. And I tried to really balance my job responsibilities with PhD research, but that didn't happen. And I had to focus completely on the job. And I decided to quit after about 3 years and focus single-mindedly on the PhD because that's the sort of dedication required, to be honest. And I completed it in 2020, graduated at the beginning of the pandemic, and then worked with Roche Pharma for a couple of years. And now I work with Blue Matter Consulting. It's a boutique biopharma strategy consulting firm they're headquartered in the US in San Francisco, and they have offices in Europe and in India as well. All right. So Supriya and Raj actually asked me to find some old school photos, and that was really tricky because I deleted my Facebook account a few years back. But luckily my wife, she was able to fish out this one photo, and it's actually, I think it's perfect for today's talk because it's from our biology HL class, and you can see a much younger Mr. Basu as our teacher. We had the privilege of having him as our bio teacher back then. And interestingly, 4 people from this photo, there's arrows pointing towards them, and you have to guess which one is me because I look pretty different now from back then. But I'm not going to reveal who I am from this photo. That's pretty obvious, I think. But anyway, point is that 4 people from this photo actually have pursued careers in the life sciences. One is a doctor based in Canada, and 2 are entrepreneurs in the health tech and wellness space. So, my journey in the life sciences really began during the IB. I took biology and chemistry at the higher level and decided to apply only to UK universities because I knew I wanted to be in the life sciences, and the 3-year sort of program option was attractive to me at the time compared to the 4 years in the US. But that said, of course, I highly encourage that you apply to US schools as well. Don't only limit yourself to the UK, because I think the US definitely has a lot to offer. In fact, I would think a lot more to offer. There are several internships that I did between my first and second year during the IB, and I think those were crucial for my applications. So if you're in year one, definitely consider doing 1 or 2 internships during the summer. And I actually managed to secure those internships through DAIS classmates whose parents were in the healthcare space. So you should. It's pretty amazing that you can actually find people. And now you of course have, I would say, the privilege of having 18 years of alumni that you can tap into, like an alumni network that you can tap into to actually find these internships and LinkedIn and whatever else, because we didn't have those things back then. For current IB students, who are currently doing the IB program, I'd recommend looking also into integrated programs. I feel like this is what I've heard, that there are programs out there that actually integrate work experience into them. And I think those would probably prepare you really well to kind of enter the workforce, post graduation, if that's what you choose to do. And also start checking for program prerequisites. I feel like we often, and not only like sort of subjects that you need to study, but like experiences that you need. It could be an internship, it could be some course that you haven't done that you need to do, and there might be an option to do it either online or through whatever else. So you should definitely check those up early on so that you can prepare accordingly. So let's move on to my undergraduate studies, which were so I did my undergraduate degree was in genetics from the University College London. And, while I've always been interested in the life sciences, I didn't know specifically which area within the life sciences to focus on. So I chose a program at UCL that allowed me to explore various disciplines before specializing in genetics. So during my first year, I did a bunch of different subjects, which was great because you kind of get to know what's out there. And then, of course, I developed a strong interest in genetics, and that also seemed promising at the time because the Human Genome Project had just been completed in 2003, and it was expected to impact, life sciences and medicine dramatically. I did some volunteering and internships over the summers. I think that's important to point out. But in hindsight, I think they were quite unstructured and just based on what interested me at the time. And internships were harder to find back then. But again, I leveraged, my personal network to secure, internship opportunities. And of course, like I said, today it's easier with platforms available to you like LinkedIn and, the Univariety platform as well. And for those of you who are starting undergrad, I'd recommend, even if you've started like a degree in the life sciences, start broad and then consider specializing in something rather than starting with something more specialized, because it's really hard to know what exactly you want at first. And I think broad exposure is really key. And both the UK and the US, offer programs that allow for flexibility, but the US definitely more so. I know people who've gone to the US and just changed their major altogether, and which is completely fine, right? Because you don't know exactly what you want to do when you're that young. It's also important to ask yourself if you truly enjoy the life sciences. I think this is critical, right? You don't want to end up in a career that you don't like. And many students, like I said, they switch majors or they pursue sort of non-life sciences careers even after graduating with a degree in the life sciences. Which is completely fine. But I think you really need to ask yourself that question, and don't just think that you're kind of bound to this career track because you did a degree in the life sciences, right? And employers definitely still value the analytical skills that you gain from a life sciences degree. So I know a lot of people a lot of my batchmates from undergrad, they went on to do like banking and things like that. So I think it's even though if you're more specialized in the UK, employers really look at the skills that you've acquired through your degree rather than the degree itself. If I could do anything differently, I would say I would have used the long vacations in the UK sort of more wisely. So, we had nearly 5 months off each year, and I returned home for every single break. And in hindsight, I really would have done at least 1 or 2 internships in the UK or Europe. I would have been more intentional about like elective choices as well. Maybe even taking some courses in business and tech. I think really pay attention to those things early on, because time really flies in college. Like, 3-4 years will be gone before you know it, and you'll have to make other decisions, like career choices, basically. So after my undergrad, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So I came back home to Bombay and again, sort of used, my network to get a lab-based internship at Piramha Life Sciences. I worked at the biomarker discovery department. And about 6 months in, I realized that a lab career really wasn't for me, but I wanted to stay in the life sciences. And that's when I started exploring other options. And I discovered this profession called genetic counseling. Again, I'll just talk a little bit about that. So, I don't think most people haven't heard about genetic counseling. I only know one other DAIS alumni who's done a degree in genetic counseling. But it's genetic counselors basically work as a part of a multidisciplinary medical team to help people understand the medical, psychological, and familial implications of genetic contributions to disease. All right. And so it's basically medical and psychosocial management of people who are at risk for genetic disorders or who are affected by genetic disorders. And I think what drew me to the field was that it involved translating genomics into clinical care, which I found really meaningful. It's not a lab-based profession actually at all. And the cost of genetic testing was actually dropping rapidly at the time. I mean, it was millions and millions of dollars to sequence your genome earlier on, and now it's dropped to under $1,000 today. So so that means you could actually bring those sorts of technologies into the clinic. And genetic counseling was almost non-existent in India at the time. So I really felt that patients could benefit from more people who were able to practice in that discipline in India. But I needed a lot of prerequisites, before I could apply to these programs, and internships and courses in psychology and things like that, which I didn't do back when I was in college. So that took me a year to complete after my 1 year at Piramha Life Sciences. Right. So I did summer school at UCLA and UC Irvine. We didn't have like Coursera and all these online courses back then. And I did an internship in Hyderabad for like 6 months, and then another internship at Tata Memorial Hospital for 6 months. So it took quite a bit to actually, build my sort of experience and resume up to actually apply to these programs. So those 2 years were like really challenging, I would say. And I wish I'd started thinking about next steps earlier during my undergrad. I feel like I could have saved a lot of time. Again, no regrets or anything, but I'm just saying that when I look back at my journey, I'm like, okay, this is something that I could have done differently. And if you find yourself in a similar situation where you graduated or about to graduate and you have no idea what you want to do, just don't worry. Use your network for guidance. Use the Univariety platform. Explore all the different career paths that are available to you in the life sciences beyond the lab. I think this is something that people don't always recognize early on, that there's many career paths in the life sciences beyond just working in a lab. In fact, that's like a very, very small percentage of all the different career tracks. And really figure out what drives you, what you enjoy, and and what's really needed in the field. I feel like it's important to find at least some. I mean, you need to find some meaning in what you're doing. I think that itself will kind of motivate you intrinsically to do whatever you end up doing. So let's talk about graduate school. So after spending a couple of years in India, I pursued a master's degree in genetic counseling from Stanford, and then a PhD in public health genetics at the University of Washington. And I think it's important to point out that both of these, again, like I said, they're not lab-based. They were actually clinical or health science degrees. And in fact, my PhD wasn't based in the lab. A lot of people think like PhD, some guy in a lab coat, like, just toiling away at the bench. That really wasn't the case. It was field-based. It involved qualitative and quantitative research. And yeah, it was actually really interesting. And you can do PhDs that are not lab-based. Again, that's the point I'm trying to make. And, another thing is that my master's had a very clear path to employment. A lot of people go into grad school not necessarily thinking about like what, your job prospects or employability is going to look like after grad school. And I think I don't think that's very astute. So I think you should think about, okay, if I'm going to do this master's degree or do this PhD, how is it really going to prepare me to either do something entrepreneurial or do something in or get employed, And so another thing is that about 50% of PhD students actually drop out midway. And I think the reason is that at that stage in life, there's other priorities that emerge. In your personal life, you might get married. I got married like 2 years into my PhD when I moved back from India, and I started working because I felt the need to. So I feel like, you really need to ponder the time commitment and that's required and the sort of trade-offs that need to be made. Again, I'm not trying to discourage you from doing a PhD. I think you should totally do it if you're interested in that field and you feel like, there are career prospects associated with it. But just think about it well before jumping into it. And I really do feel like an advanced degree opens doors in the to various life sciences careers. So definitely keep that in mind as you're planning, figuring out whether you want to go to grad school or not. And again, when choosing graduate programs, internships and, jobs that you might do to fund your graduate program, if that's an option for you. So that often is like when you do a PhD, especially, you can do research assistantships and teaching assistantships on campus that will actually pay for your degree. Otherwise, I mean, imagine paying for your degree for 5 more years after your undergrad. But yeah, anyway. So really focus on programs, internships, and campus jobs that have have employment and entrepreneurial sort of potential, I would say, right? And if you plan to actually move back to India, like I did, I think having a life sciences degree from the US or UK can actually be an advanced degree can be significant, like a significant advantage when you're joining, the workforce and looking to be employed. That's for sure. Right. Let's move on to life sciences career paths. So this slide actually sort of gives a very broad overview of the career paths that are available to life sciences students. I mean, what am I saying? Students with, and I've marked out the ones that I've personally sort of walked in blue. So I feel like one thing that's important to recognize that in today's world, you're not limited to any single path. I mean, your careers in the life sciences can allow for movement across sort of different sectors, and many professionals actually wear multiple hats across these broad areas, right? For example, at Stanford, you have people who hold a academic position, professors, right, who've actually started their own companies as well. They might be the chief scientific officers or chief executive officers of like startups. So that's totally possible today. And so you have academia, then, which is basically involves research, teaching, mentoring, basically becoming a professor at an academic institution. Then you have industry roles, which focuses on really applying that research to create products that improve health. And again, that can be further subdivided into like pharmaceuticals, diagnostics, medical devices, software as a medical device, health and wellness. That's an interesting sort of new emerging space that's blurring the lines across all these different sort of segments within industry. And you also have environment and agriculture. So this could be like genetic modification of crops, creating sort of organisms through synthetic biology to kind of clean up, I don't know, like pollution in the ocean and things like that. Again, I don't know much about that space, so I'm being a little vague, but these are actually industry options that are available to people in the life sciences who choose to pursue the life sciences. Then you have hospital and healthcare. So again, if you really want to see patients and, again, study medicine or get into hospital management, so that's another area. Then there's the PE and VC space. So if you want to sort of be at the intersection of the life sciences and investing, I think there's some very promising career paths that you can go down in the sort of private equity and venture capital space as well. And then there's advisory and consulting services. Again, marked in blue because that's what I currently do. So these are really services like consulting that offer strategic advice on business development and market entry, regulatory issues for life sciences companies. The clients are typically pharma companies and biotech companies. And then finally, you also have government and regulatory bodies that you could work for that oversee regulation and drug approvals and things like that. And then nonprofits that focus on sort of funding and for health programs and kind of advocacy for marginalized patient populations and things like that. On the right-hand side, you have, again, a more granular view of all these career paths available to you. And again, with my experiences highlighted in blue. A lot of these career paths are within the pharmaceutical and diagnostics industry. Right. All right. Let's move on to industry experience. So again, I worked with Strand Life Sciences and Roche, where my roles were a blend of sort of medical affairs and commercialization. In the genomics industry, medical affairs really serves as the bridge between science and healthcare, and involves sort of providing scientific and clinical expertise, supporting the development of genetic tests, engaging with doctors, and sort of ensuring accurate communication of genetic test results and things like that to physicians, right? And of course, educating the different stakeholders on the relevance of sort of these innovations in genomics. And on the commercialization side, it's more focused on business growth. So developing strategies to market and sell genomic tests, understanding the market needs, building partnerships, expanding access, and working on pricing, distribution, sales, things like that, right? And several factors actually influenced my decision to pursue these industry roles. So one was that the genomics industry was quite new in India at the time, and with very low genetic literacy amongst clinicians. So while genomic testing did have the potential to actually sort of improve health outcomes and transform fields like pediatric neurology and oncology, it was all contingent on clinicians actually understanding how to use these tests and improve patient care. That didn't exist at the time. And of course, in recent years, you also have gene therapies that have become available. So that's the second thing, that back in school, like undergrad, like that was all theory, like, okay, one day we will develop gene therapies. And now that's a reality, which is insane. And for those of you who don't know, so this is like gene therapies really involves modifying and replacing faulty genes within the person's cells to treat disease or prevent disease. So, I think it's pretty cool to have seen the field come so far over the last 18 years. And I had the privilege of actually working on a gene therapy for spinal muscular atrophy while I was working with Roche. And the last reason why that led me to want to join industry was because I really wanted to understand these commercial realities of bringing scientific advancements to the market. I think graduate education is great and it teaches you about implementation, but I really lacked the knowledge on commercialization back then, which I think is an absolutely critical piece when you're kind of trying to improve outcomes for patients, right? I mean, what's the point of studying all this stuff when there's nothing available in the market that you can implement, right? So I think that was really important to me at the time. All right, moving on to my consulting experience. So believe it or not, I didn't actually plan to become a consultant ever, but then I came across an opportunity with Blue Matter Consulting, so Blue Matter specializes in oncology and rare disease. And both these areas are areas that I'm deeply passionate about because of my work in genomics. There's a lot of genomics involved in these two disciplines specifically. And the role appealed to me because it aligned with my experience and offered me a chance to build sort of very valuable, transferable skills in a very fast-paced, high-pressure environment, and also provided me with exposure to strategic decision-making processes within sort of industry, right, within the pharma and biotech companies. And that would have taken like much longer if I had just stuck on in these pure industry roles. So at Blue Matter, I'm actually part of a sort of a global client-facing consulting team. We work on commercial strategy projects at the product, portfolio, and organizational levels. Our clients range from big pharma to small biotech companies, and most of them are based in the US and some in Europe as well. And like I said, there's a focus on rare disease and oncology. And there are some other specialties that we cover as well, but these are the main ones. And the sorts of teams that we engage with, in our projects are, the medical affairs team, the business development team, market access, sales, and of course, like the C-suites, your CXOs, CEOs, and CEOs, etc. So I think it's really pretty cool to be able to kind of work with these like senior members of these companies and figure out how exactly it is that they make the strategic decisions that they do, and help them towards making those decisions as well through consulting. And I think a few things that I've learned from consulting is, again, for someone who's considering a sort of career in the life sciences, that it's a really great environment for rapid learning and skill building. I think you learn so much in such a short span of time. It's high pressure, but you learn a lot. And if you have a good company culture, that really kind of makes the high pressure tolerable. And I think another cool thing is that you can actually enter the industry, the consulting industry, straight out of undergrad at an entry level role. You don't even need an advanced degree. Of course, you need to show that there's various you need to demonstrate aptitude for consulting. So there's like pretty intense like tests and case studies and things that you need to do to enter. But you don't need an advanced degree necessarily. But having an advanced degree can help you enter slightly more senior roles as compared to someone who's only completed their undergrad. And I think that you also, like I said, you gain like great exposure to all these different project types and develop transferable hard and soft skills like data analysis, market research, financial modeling. And it could be, you could consider consulting to be like a stepping stone to, to a senior position, maybe in industry or something more entrepreneurial. Or it could be a lifelong career in itself. You might want to pursue like partnership and stay on with a consulting firm, for the long haul. So there's a small percentage of people who do that, like just stay on in consulting beyond sort of 3 to 5 years. And there's, I would say most actually move on to industry or other things. All right, this is my last slide. So some key takeaways. Explore and plan early. So again, like I said, identify those program prerequisites and explore integrated programs which allow you to gain a work experience early. Leverage your school counseling services and network for career guidance early. I can't emphasize this enough. I really feel like you should do this. Whether it's in school or in college, really use these services. I feel like I feel like in college I didn't use them enough, and I really feel like you should. I think it could help give you direction, save you time, and you should definitely do it. And of course, explore life sciences careers beyond the lab. There are many paths that exist outside academia. Choose programs and electives wisely while you're in school. When I say school, I mean college, grad school, whatever. So, again, be deliberate about choosing what electives, internships, assistantships that, the ones that you choose, and make sure they align with sort of your employment or entrepreneurship ambitions. Gain skills and experience beyond your core expertise. I feel like this is critical. Like, don't just do life science. I mean, your domain of expertise will always be the life sciences. I get that, but really do stuff outside the life science. I feel like the most amazing opportunities sort of exist at these intersections of health and tech or health and business and things like that, right? So just really look outside and get some experience in those things. You don't have to do a degree in those things necessarily, but just some like electives or like a diploma course or a certificate course or something like that while you're in grad school. And the other thing is brand value. I really do think that it can open doors. Again, I'm not saying that I just feel like having a degree from a US or a UK or a Singapore, a university from abroad really does matter. I feel like people really value the quality of the education that you get from going abroad. So, consider that when you're selecting programs as well. And again, my final sort of bucket is finding meaning and considering practicalities. So evaluate, if you enjoy and find meaning in the field that you're currently interested that you're doing, and don't hesitate to course correct. I mean, either leave the life sciences, pivot to some other life science that would be more interesting to you and that you find more meaning, and really do that. And consider, where your expertise is valued. And consider exploring consulting, for example, early on in your career, if you want to build like certain skills that are versatile and want to gain a better understanding of industry. And then, of course, this is like pretty general, but just where you have many options. You have, I guess, Canada, the US, UK, Australia. I don't know how many different places. Back then, it was simpler. I feel like it was mainly the US and the UK and some Singapore. But I think there's more options now. So really weigh the pros and cons of the programs, the career prospects, of these different geographies as you're choosing, deciding your next steps. But that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sahil. That was indeed a very interesting journey. And I would say, because as a person who don't know much about life sciences, I could also learn a lot from your journey. So thank you so much for that. I'm sure we have a lot of audience and parents, alumni, faculties as well who are in audience. So they would be happy to ask a few questions as well. So students, parents, alumni, I would just request you, whatever questions you have, you can type in the chat box and we will take it along the way. And meanwhile, we have a few questions for Sahil as well that we will ask. I'm sure Sahil would be happy to answer those questions. So, so if you could just, Sahil, if you could close I think you're still sharing the screen. Yeah, perfect. Yeah. So just my first question to you, we'll be taking few questions. My first question to you is, could you please share some of the important skills students should have and should start developing if they are interested in career in life sciences?
I feel like important skills that students should have, I think you'll acquire a lot of those during your life sciences program, of course. You need to choose your program wisely, like I said, like figuring out what are the different career prospects after you do that program. So I think you really develop those important skills from those programs. I mean, specific skills. I feel like programs are cut out to train you in specific things. And then when you get the internship experience as well, that's how you develop more skills. But it's really, I don't think there's any general skill set that you need. I think it really depends on what you want to do, Raj. I don't think there's anything, sorry, I don't have a very detailed response for this particular question.
Oh, thank you, Sahil. I think there's a follow-up question to that, and like I think maybe that's more specific, and so maybe our answer. So, you could expand on that. From Fujita, she's from the 11th grade. She is actually interested in the field of life sciences, but she is interested in a couple of different things. So she's interested in genetic engineering, forensics, neuroscience, and biochemistry. So, for example, how
Okay.
would the skill sets in the different life sciences kind of differ? And like, how can you perhaps, guide better in terms of how you can make that choice? Like, what would be like better when you were selecting? You said start broad and then go deep in. So, how would you kind of narrow down what you like and how why?
Right. So again, assuming that you can start, I don't know whether Rujita is applying to the US or the UK or where she's applying, but if she's applying to the US, for example, and in a more sort of general life sciences degree, start by taking electives in those subjects, right? You may not have that option in your first year. I don't know, but definitely in your second year and your third year, you would, where you can select a few courses in genetic engineering or a few courses in forensics. So that's really one way to kind of build sort of knowledge in those spaces, right? Another thing that you could do is that while you're in your first and second year, start looking for internships in those specific things, right? That will give you some like sort of very, so you will have some lab work that's part of your degree. There's no doubt about that, but you can pick up a lot even doing internships and try and finding those in the country that you're studying in. So if you're in the US, for example, I'm sure that you would have a lot more opportunities to do internships in genetic engineering, or they might not even be internships, they might be observerships, right? So it really depends on what companies allow someone who's an undergrad to do. I mean, there might be some very sensitive sort of materials that they can't allow, anyone to just they can't allow an unskilled person to do certain things. But uh, I would explore what's out there, and I feel like you do the courses, you do the internships, you figure out, okay, you're interested in those three things. What are the career prospects that? I mean, would you want to become a forensic scientist? Biochemistry is pretty broad, right? Biochemistry could mean, I mean, that's much broader than forensic science or genetic engineering. So I feel like you'll end up studying that anyway as part of your life sciences degree. So yeah, really figure out, do the internships, do the courses, figure out what's interesting you, and see whether see what kind of jobs that are available, after you graduate, and maybe that's how you can that can guide your decision.
Thanks, Sahil. Raj, you want to take the next one?
Yes. So we have a question from Jay Maru. Question is, not taking physics as a subject in 11th, 12th grade, did it hinder you in any way? Back when you entered undergrad, the best place to learn bioengineering, biotech, so it's two questions actually, biotech, life sciences, etc., was US, UK, but not India. Having seen the evolution over last decade, do you feel that's still the case or you see changes?
So yeah, not taking physics didn't negatively impact my applications at all. In fact, back then, they didn't allow you to do all three sciences unless you plan to apply to a medical program, like a degree in medicine, like an MBBS or, an MBBS. I think a couple of students who did want to do that. So then you had to take biology, chemistry, and physics, all three of them. I don't know what the rules are currently for the IB program, whether they allow you to take, a third HL subject that's physics. So that's something to inquire. But to answer your question, no, it did not negatively impact my. I don't think any program, unless you're doing like biophysics, I would think. I mean, no program expects you to have done physics. I think bio and chemistry are definitely important, but not physics. Physics not so much when you're applying to programs. But then again, things change over time. Different programs have different requirements. You should definitely go to their website, or if there's not enough information available on their website, reach out to the department that you want to apply to, and say that you're a student from India, wanting to apply, eager to apply, and just wanted to know what the prerequisites are. Because knowing the prerequisites is, I mean, what would really sort of suck is if you apply and then you get a response saying, sorry, your application was rejected because you didn't have a prerequisite that you needed, right? So that comes to my point that I brought up during my presentation. Start early, start to identify what those prerequisites are early enough so that you can actually go ahead and do and sort of meet those prerequisites, right? So that's one thing. About your second question regarding like the US and the UK being the best places to study sort of biology, and like I would still say that yeah, the most cutting edge research is happening there in the US and the UK. I think you need to check with the programs that you're applying to, like, you know, how much access would you have. So it's one thing for a university to advertise all these things on their website, right? That okay, we have these top researchers and we have, you know, all these people from like Nobel laureates and all of that. But what does that mean for you as an undergrad student, right? Like, well, are you going to be able to, for example, do an internship at their lab over the summer, you know, or during the program? Are they going to teach you specific subjects? I think you need to figure out a way to answer those questions, because I think a lot of these things might be done for sort of advertising purposes, and they are relevant to people who are graduates, I mean graduate students. You need to figure out how that's relevant to you as an undergrad, right? So I would again go like, you know, uh, suggest that you go to their websites, ask questions. Like, you know, you'll be surprised how willing sort of like the sort of international students department maybe is to answer these questions. And yeah, and of course speak to your career counselors as well. I'm sure they have experience with these questions and they might be able to, you know, offer you good guidance.
I think I'll just do a follow-up question to that, Sahil, if that's okay.
Right.
So
Yeah.
with so many advancements happening, you're talking about the US and the UK being quite cutting edge, but so many advancements happening in the healthcare sector. How do you recommend like a student or a parent keeping themselves updated? Is there something students can do now to stay informed and to stay informed, and like books you recommend, or what do you suggest?
Yeah, I mean, I think we live in a sort of age of information overload. I think we hear this all the time. There's just so much information that's available to us and sort of being thrown at us, right? And how do you really sift through it all and figure out what's relevant to you, right? So I think, of course, after you've identified, the first step is to really identify. There's no way you can keep yourself updated on everything. It's not possible, right? So you need to first identify what are you really interested in, what are your areas of interest, right? One thing that you can do is, you know, there's various sort of electronic sort of journals or sort of like like genomeweb.com is one of them, right? They're like, and you can actually access those. You can set like what areas you're interested in the filters, and you would receive like a weekly or a daily digest in your inbox with information that you selected, right? So let's say you're interested in forensics, genetic engineering, and biochemistry. You would be able to select those, like there'll be checkboxes for those. You select those, and then you'll get emails, you know, every week or you know, daily. You choose what you want, and on like the latest sort of updates in those fields. So that's one thing that you could do. There's also like some great podcasts out there. Again, Spotify, YouTube. I think there's a lot of like scientists are now like sort of are getting into like the influencer world. So you might be able to find some cool stuff, some good podcasts that you could subscribe to. Google Alerts and, you know, Feedly are two, again, excellent ways to kind of get updates from multiple sources. I would consider using those as well. And you can also like use social media, like, you know, Twitter and LinkedIn to find influential people in the areas that you're interested in and follow them, right? You can follow anyone pretty much, right? So again, but of course you need to be careful with that because you don't want to waste too much time on those websites and when you could be doing more productive things. Another thing is like read later apps. I feel like when you're on your phone or on your iPad or computer or whatever, you just come across so much interesting stuff and you just don't know what to do with it, right? So you get these really good read later apps. One of them is called Readwise, that you can actually just like click a button and kind of it'll take when you come across something interesting or highlight something and it'll get saved somewhere and you can access it later. So what I'm really suggesting is, you know, you set up a system where new information on your areas of interests are sort of being thrown at you, and then you cultivate a habit of reading that content for like, let's say 20-30 minutes a day. I feel like if you just keep reading all day, that's information overload, you know, and you're not necessarily going to do anything with that. And but if you just read for 20-30 minutes a day, that should prevent you from sort of overwhelming yourself. And I really feel like the power of compounding applies here, right? So if you keep doing this daily, you create a habit out of it, and then you have some sort of digital tool to save sort of interesting content and snippets. It could be like Evernote or your Apple Notes app. And yeah, and you, I feel like that's something that you could do. In fact, there's this really interesting book called Building a Second Brain by Tiago Forte. And it really provides a very interesting system to sort of capture and organize and act on information that you're capturing. So I would suggest that you go through that, because it's super overwhelming to kind of to go through everything. You can't do it, and you need some sort of system. Otherwise, you'll just be jumping from here to there, and it won't be very productive.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sahil. Also, I would request you, if the book you mentioned, if you can type in the chat box for audience, so that
Yeah, just a second.
yeah. Meanwhile, I'll ask the next question. We have a question from a student, Kinjal Shah. NUS National University of Singapore has a three years bound scholarship science program. We have 4 years of undergraduate and then 3 years of Singapore government job. Would you recommend this opportunity?
It's hard for me to make a recommendation without knowing more about it. I would say that's one. But it sounds interesting for sure. I think there's a lot of good science happening in Singapore. And if they're saying that you can do the degree and then they would employ you right after that, I think that's pretty attractive in itself, because that kind of sets you on the path to potentially continue working in Singapore after that. I mean, you might be part of that program for like 2-3 years, and then after graduation, and then you can move on to either you stay in with that program if you really enjoyed, you can move on to industry. I know there's a lot of biotech companies in Singapore, and in Singapore mainly, actually, Singapore and some in Malaysia as well, that and even Hong Kong, actually. So you could actually I think it sounds interesting. I can't recommend for or against it, but I'm happy to, if you want to, I gave my number and my email I can share it later as well in the chat. And feel free to contact me. I'm happy to chat more with you about that.
Thanks, Sahil. I think we'll take the next question as well, which is, I think, the life sciences is an industry which is mentally and emotionally quite demanding. Do you have any tips for handling the stress in such a high pressure industry?
Yeah, I mean, the life science industry, especially if you're in a patient-facing role, right? It can be quite emotionally demanding. I mean, I'll give you the example of my time at Strand Life Sciences. So a lot of I did have to speak to patients often, and quite often these patients were sort of terminally ill or affected by serious genetic conditions. And I feel like in order to best serve these patients, you have to communicate sort of sensitively, sort of empathetically with them. And my training in genetic counseling definitely helped sort of prepare me for that. I feel like it and also the volunteering. I've done a lot of volunteering work as well. I mean, again, during the summers and as part of my PhD as well. So I've volunteered with the Alzheimer's and Related Disorders Society of India, with the Thalassemia Society. I've done a lot of qualitative research as well with the muscular dystrophy community. So I think having all of those experiences, it really, and sort of repeatedly having gone through the process of dealing with sort of overwhelm that you feel when you interact with individuals going through grief or health crisis, I think that prepares you really well to have those conversations, right? So it allows you to sort of create the appropriate emotional distance with patients. And I think that's really necessary for you to be supportive and be helpful, really. And yeah, about it being mentally demanding, yeah, definitely. I feel like as you move through your career and you kind of take on more senior roles and there's more demands on your time, both personal and professional, I feel like the best way, and that is going to happen most likely, right? And you read so much about mental health, on social media nowadays, about young people ending their lives and doing drastic things because of pressure at work and whatnot. So but I really feel that what's really helped me, and I've been forced to develop certain daily practices and they include, a certain amount of exercise, meditation, reading, general stuff, eating healthy, controlling caffeine intake, getting the right amount of sleep. And I think that all of these things, people talk about it all the time, but they are really, really important to kind of maintaining your sanity and just making sure that you're doing justice to all the different areas of your life. I mean, your life is not just your job, right? You have other stuff to do. I have a kid, for example, who's 2 years old, right? So and as you go through life, there'll just be stuff that will require time, and you need to keep yourself healthy and happy. So, and I think another thing that's really helpful is just sort of taking time off. I used to be pretty bad at this, but I think really taking a few days off can really, help you reset and put things into perspective. So yeah, basically you need to figure out how to, balance your energy, what energizes you, what drains you. Spend time figuring that out and try and put yourself in situations that, if you can, that energize you, rather than drain you. Yeah, sorry, that was a long-winded answer, but I hope it answered your question.
No, it's actually required to understand the depth and understanding you have. It's very important for students to understand. And as students are asking questions, I would just recommend students, if you want to reach out to Sahil, you can definitely reach out to him through Untitled portal. It's like LinkedIn of your own school, so you can definitely reach out to him. And whenever you ask any doubt, Sahil would receive an email notification, and he would be really happy to assist you, as he already mentioned. So feel free to ask him as well. Him as all alumni are there, so if you want to ask other alumni as well, you can definitely ask. Meanwhile, I'll ask you another question, Sahil. Uh, it's a very interesting question. If you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice when you were still in school, what would it be? Uh, would you have done anything different?
So I think one thing that I mentioned during my talk was about, just starting early, just leveraging the resource. We as DIS alumni have access to, I would say, a tremendous amount of resource. A lot of people don't have access to that. Like whether it's your alumni network, it could be a personal network, uh, your career counselor, whether it's internal or external to the school, really, really, and even when you're in college, like the career counseling services that they offer there, really, really take advantage of those. When you go abroad, I mean, even the tuition that you're paying, it's not only for like just going to class and studying something, right? You have access to all these things, and you should definitely take advantage of them. I think they're super helpful, and like I said, they can really provide you with a lot of direction early on, and help you explore what else is out there in terms of life sciences career path. So that's one thing that piece of advice that I would sort of give my younger self, like leverage what you have access to, right? Don't take it for granted. A lot of people don't have it. And I think another thing is that I feel like I would want my figure out a way for my younger self to give my older self some advice. So quite the opposite of what you asked, uh, uh, Rajshri. And I just feel like, as we move through life, we kind of forget what truly brings us joy and what we truly value. And then we kind of feel that you might have found like a career that, I mean, is good, but like you kind of feel a little lost and directionless. And I think maybe when we were younger, maybe we were closer to knowing, those things, like, what we enjoy, what brings us joy, what we truly value, at least subconsciously. And so I would say, maybe one thing that you could consider, again, this is like really, you don't have to do this, but you just maintain some kind of like physical or digital journal where you pen your thoughts about what interests you, what excites you. Another thing is, the SOPs that you write for college. I feel like you have to put in so much thought into those, right? Don't just keep those somewhere safe so that you can kind of refer to them to kind of realize, because you might have to remind yourself, because a lot of your decisions as you walk through life, of course, initially they're shaped by, what you're passionate about, but later in life they might be shaped by, what's practical. And but I feel like you can't lose that sort of passionate side of you. And one way to remind yourself of that is, through some sort of maybe journal that you maintain or through your SOPs. But yeah, I think if I'd done something like that, I would definitely want to look back at it every now and then.
Thank you, Sahil. I think there's a learning for all of us, no matter what field we're from, to kind of do that, penning your thoughts down so that you can come back to it later and perhaps reflect on it. I'm from the design field, but I feel like that's good advice for any field, not just life sciences. So I think what you touched on was very important, that, what brings you joy, and kind of going back to that sense. And currently you're a consultant at Blue Matter. And I think I just want to touch a little bit on this as our last question before we jump into a little bit of a rapid fire. But what is the most exciting part of your current job? And is there a moment in your workday that you most look forward to? And could you describe that?
Yeah, I would say the most exciting part of my current job is like I feel like I think anyone who pursues the life sciences, I mean, you're sort of a science biology nerd at heart, right? So I think the part that allows me to really sort of nerd out learning about a new disease area or like a drug or a technology. And again, that doesn't happen every day, but it often happens at the initial part of a project where you kind of need to rapidly learn about a new subject or technology disease area. So I think I think, and what's really great about the life sciences consulting is that you're privy to all these new technologies that are being developed that are not even often not commercially available yet, and can have a massive impact on improving outcomes and patients. And as a consultant, you can potentially play a role in sort of bringing those technologies to to market, right? So I think that that's really really exciting to kind of in some indirect way be able to impact patient outcomes. And I would say in my industry roles, I used to really look forward to interactions with patients. Again, being trained as a genetic counselor, that's really what sort of I find extremely fulfilling, and just being able to, uh, you know, help a patient or a family make a critical decision or take a critical action based on their genetic test results. I think that was really fulfilling to me. I used to really look forward to that. And and it just used to put things into perspective for me and sort of remind me why I was doing what I did. I definitely would want to sort of do more of that in the future. Be more directly involved in with patients and their families.
Thank you so much, Sahil. That was actually a very nice answer and definitely gives students a nice perspective. So, students, if you have any questions, you can type in. Meanwhile, Sahil, we have some fun questions for you as well. Students have understood your academic side and they've learned from you. Now, we'll just ask a few fun questions if you're okay with that.
Sure, I don't know how well I'll be able to answer them, but sure, you can ask them.
Some fun questions so that students can understand about, your some fun questions as well. So just very simple questions. I'll take a question for you. First question, you have to answer quickly, whatever comes to your mind. First question, Bombay or London?
Bombay.
Yeah.
If you could have a meal with any one scientist from history, who would it be?
History. The first name that's coming to mind is like Craig Venter, but I have no reason why. But yeah, he was heavily involved in sequencing the first human genome. So yeah.
A nice answer. Best library at Stanford.
Well, it was the wow. I feel embarrassed not knowing the answer because I've forgotten all the library names, man. Seriously. And I never spent so much time in the libraries, and they had such beautiful libraries. Again, looking back, I'm like, why didn't I do that? But sorry, Raj, I don't have an answer to this
That's
question.
fine.
I don't.
That's fine. Maybe we could do a parallel question. Who is your favorite professor and what did he teach?
I'm forgetting his name, but he was a professor of developmental biology, and he had this really long, like Alfred Dumbledore type of beard. And every time he used to walk into his class, he used to like have this like very calming music playing before the class, right? And yeah, he was my favorite. And the way like his lectures were just absolutely amazing. Like I just feel like when you used to look forward to them, when you went in, you learned a lot, and you came out. He had a very intuitive way and a very different way of teaching. But yeah, unfortunately, I'm forgetting his name.
So this question is very interesting. If you could switch roles with anyone in your team, you're not just your team, with anyone in the world, I would say, any career you could just switch for a day, what would it be?
So there's this one professor at Stanford. His name is Dr. Ewan Ashley, and it's just insane like how many different things he does. He's a cardiologist. He runs a lab on cardiogenomics. He uh, has like 2 3 startups. He also has like appointments he's also I think the chair of medicine at Stanford now, and he's also works with pharma in some sort of executive capacity. So I feel like, and and if you just listen to his podcast and stuff, he just does such amazing things. And I feel like, I mean, I don't think I'm ready for that sort of role yet. But if I had to be in that in some sort of role, it would be that, in the future, where you're kind of doing a bit of everything that you enjoy. You're not just doing one thing. I think that's what I would want
Thanks, Sahil.
myself.
To wrap that up, perhaps the last rapid fire question is a little bit nostalgic as opposed to grilling you on college. The nostalgia element really comes in where we got to just sort of ask you, who was your favorite professor in school while you were at DIS? When you look back at your time here, is there something that you recollect in terms of an experience?
Definitely biology. I think like Mr. Basu. I feel like I used to ask such weird questions in school. Like I don't know, if he remembers, but like uh, weird questions in biology related to biology. And I feel like while he would have like this expression which I can't describe, I feel like he always entertained them, and I feel like he really, I feel like he really sort of motivated me uh, to kind of pursue the life sciences. And yeah, I feel like he was definitely in school. He was my favorite teacher, no doubt about that.
Thank you so much, Sahil. I know that was not part of the thing, but we wanted to put you on the spot a bit as well.
Of
Uh,
course, of course.
Thank you for walking us through this amazing kind of knowledge base of the life sciences. I think that was definitely eye-opening for me and for our audience too. We definitely will be sharing this with our students and our parents of current students, as well as our alumni base. So people who have joined this talk, you will also have access to this document later on as well, where in case you want like a specific book or you want a specific podcast that Sahil spoke about, you will have access to that as well. Definitely sign up for our next lecture. We will be doing that in November. We are going to try to do DAIS Discover Journeys at least once a month with a different speaker with a different career pathway. The idea is to kind of share insights from our amazing alumni base. Sahil, to correct you now, we are 20 years, not 18. You
Correct,
were two
correct.
years older than me, so definitely a wealth of experience that we have from all our alumni. Definitely please use the Univariety base as well to reach out for questions and really like try to understand that, whatever career path you do choose and want to choose, that it's a very mindful way of thinking about it, and that don't worry, there will be people along the journey to help you through it all. Raj, any closing thoughts from you as well? Right. Raj, any closing thoughts from you as well?
I feel like maybe he can't hear you for some
I
reason.
think yeah, perhaps I'm muted. Raj, any closing thoughts from Univariety? Okay, I don't think you can hear me. That's fine.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for joining today. Really appreciate it and look forward to our next lecture in November. Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Raj.
Thank you so much, Sahil. Thank you.